my 10 favorite reading experiences of 2025 so far. I have selected my 10 favorite books of the year. Now, I'm not saying these are the best books ever written. I am saying that these are the books that I loved more than any others because of the reading experience, because of how they made me feel, because of what they made me think about, and how long they've lasted with me after the end. I'm going to go through these in order. So starting with number 10, ending with number 1. I hope that you find some books on this list that you either haven't heard about yet, or haven't read, or haven't been convinced to read yet, or maybe we have some favorites in common. If so, let me know in the comments. Hello, my name is Carly. I read and review historical fiction. As always, if you like this post, be sure and subscribe and follow along for more bookish content, all historical fiction focused. There is one contemporary book on this list that has a dual timeline. There is some literary fiction, but for the most part, all of this has a historical element or twist to it. So definitely, I think this is going to be a great list for you if you enjoy historical fiction. As always, all the books are linked in the description below. Let's just get started. Let's go through these books. First is the book club for Troublesome Women by Marie Bostwick. This is set in the late 1960s. It's set in suburban DC, and it follows a group of women who are kind of unlikely friends. These are women from various different walks of life, but they all live in the same neighborhood and befriend each other in some way, shape, or form, and ultimately develop really strong, lasting bonds and support each other through some very difficult times over the course of a year. The book is centered around a book club that the women form, and the first book that they read is The Feminine Mystique, which, if you're familiar, is a nonfiction book that kind of took the world by storm in the late 60s. It was one of the first like really popular feminist anthems. And what I loved about this book is it really felt like a slice of life. You had women from various different backgrounds, though there could have been a little bit more diversity. That's my one complaint about this book, but I still loved it so much. I felt like I got to know these women by the end of the book, and I really just didn't want it to end. And that usually is a good sign of a book that I feel very connected to. I think this is a great book for book clubs or for anyone who wants a little bit of that representation. You know, as women, whether we're married with kids or not, there are certain obligations and expectations that are still to this day kind of forced upon us. And I think that this book does a great job of representing that and representing that early phase of what if I want something different, or what if I want something more in terms of women's rights. And I enjoyed it so much. Red Clay by Charles Fancher. You know, I wasn't sure when I sat down to make this list if this book would end up on here, because there was one other book that I loved almost as much as this. And I thought that book would actually be on this list. And I'm talking about Harlem Rhapsody. But the more I thought about it, the more that this book just really just screamed to be on this list. This is a debut novel by Charles Fancher, and the book is based on his own great-grandfather's experiences in post-Civil War Reconstruction. And the book is set in Red Clay, Alabama, and it's just a beautiful family history or family saga about a father and son told over the course of several years and their experience in post-slavery Alabama. I gobbled this up. I think I read this over the course of 2 days and didn't know how much I was going to love this when I opened it up. I had a feeling. The whole premise is, at the beginning of the book, the patriarch of the family has just passed away, and at the funeral, this frail, elderly white woman shows up and says, "My family used to own yours, and I've got stories to tell." And the book just kind of unravels from there, and it's so beautiful. I just loved the representation in this book, the strong Black male representation in this book, and what it meant to be men, Black men in particular, in post-Civil War South, trying to kind of make a way for your family and create something better than what you've had access to before. And I thought this was beautifully written. There are some elements that I think could have been done a little bit differently. For example, there's the secondary storyline of the white woman and her relationship with the patriarch of the family. And while I understand why the author chose to include that, I think it kind of meandered at times and took us on a journey that we didn't really need to enhance the story. That's my only complaint about this book. Otherwise, I think this is really well done. I cannot wait to see what he does next. It's very obvious that he wrote this book with a lot of love and passion for this story, and it just oozes out of the pages. One for the Blackbird, One for the Crow by Olivia Hawker. This was one of my online book club's book selections earlier this year, and I loved this story. I was not surprised because I've read at least one other Olivia Hawker that I absolutely adored. It's called October in the Earth. This book, you guys, this is set in, 1870s Wyoming, and it's all about two families who live next door to each other on the prairie. They aren't necessarily close, don't really help each other out. But when both households lose their adult men, kind of the head of the household, they are forced to work together to get through the harsh winter. And because of that event, the two matriarchs of the family do not see eye to eye. And it's just brilliantly written. I loved how slow and methodical this book was. So if you're looking for an action-packed book, this is not it. This is a slow character study as well as a perfect slice of life glimpse into prairie life. It is all about the monotony and the drudgery of surviving in this frontier space. I loved the two teenage characters in this book and the story of their relationship and how it develops. I thought it was just an excellent addition to add kind of tension to an already tense environment. It is a bit chunky, but overall, I think this was so worth it. And it just reminded me how much I love Western stories and stories about the American West. I cannot wait to read more of Olivia Hawker. She has a new book that has already come out this year, and it's on my TBR. To no one's surprise, Before Dorothy by Hazel Gaynor had to be on this list. This is the origin story that you did not know you needed. This is the story of Auntie Em and her relationship and how it develops with Uncle Henry, how they come to be on the prairie in Kansas, and just their love story, their story of their farm, and all the things that happen before Dorothy even enters the story. It's told in a dual timeline, flashing back to Chicago in the early 20s when Emily and her sister are kind of living this carefree lifestyle, when she meets Henry and kind of how their relationship evolves and develops. Then you're in Kansas in the early 30s. We have the Great Depression, we have the Dust Bowl, all these things that are happening, and then Dorothy shows up on their doorstep. It's just so well done. It's again, a great slice of life book. You really get the sense that you are living on the prairie with Em and Henry, and I did not want this to end. There's so many trials and tribulations, yet it is still filled with hope and light and love, and I can't recommend this book enough. The King's Messenger by Susanna Kersley was so stunning. I loved this lyrical, beautifully written book about a king's messenger who happens to have the second sight. And he is being sent by King James to retrieve a man suspected of killing King James's son and bring him back to King James's court. However, Our main character, again, has the second sight, and he knows that this guy is innocent. So it's the story, it's this kind of moral story of what is this king's messenger going to do? How is he going to navigate this situation? There's also a really lovely kind of enemies to lovers relationship that's brewing and happening and developing in this book, but it doesn't take away from that main kind of moral obligation story. In addition, because he has the second sight, he has these visions of not only what is going to happen, but he also has some kind of there's some kind of fantasy elements here that I just gobbled up. I love magical realism, especially magical realism that is married to a beautiful historical story like this one. It's set in the early 17th century in the UK, obviously, and I just loved this journey and did not want it to end. It's so, so beautiful, and I can't wait to read more of Susanna Kersley. Well, here are down to the top 5. I bet there's going to be some surprises in here, including this one. Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I have come on before to say I love Emily Henry, and she is a contemporary fiction author that I will read anything she writes. I think that she does romance and banter and just emotional romances in a way that nobody else seems to be able to do. Now, there's a lot of controversy about this book. Maybe not controversy. Let me just say a lot of her forever fans do not like this book as much as I do. And I totally understand why. As I said before, this is not her typical rom-com. If that is what you're expecting, don't read this book. This is her first, that I know of, foray into a dual timeline where we have a historical timeline that's adding so much context and depth to the story. In addition, we have a contemporary timeline with 2 characters who are at odds, vying for the same job, that happen to fall for each other. And it's just so well done. I love the structure that she used in this book. And what I mean by that is the historical timeline, which is the story of this heiress who is kind of caught up in this whirlwind relationship with a rock star. That timeline is told from 2 different perspectives. Each of those segments of the book have their story versus the truth. And I loved that. It really kind of conjured up the pop culture that is so common and prevalent these days, and that early celebrity, what's real versus what's not. You know, we're sold celebrity, right? And this book really captured that in a terrific way. I totally understand why everybody says this is basically just another 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. However, I think that is a huge compliment. And again, I've said it before, if you loved that book, why wouldn't you read this one? Because they are similar in some ways, but to me, they're totally different books. When I read Happy Land by Dolan Perkins Valdez earlier this year, I had just had surgery and I had some time off work, and I devoured this book in less than 36 hours. And I knew then that this was going to be one of my favorite books of the year. At the time, I was saying probably my favorite book of the year. Since then, it's been dethroned. However, it is still a terrific book. Most people know her book, Take My Hand, and love it. And I think that if you are a fan of Take My Hand, you definitely need to read this book. They're both about powerhouse Black women and kind of the story and the experience of Black women. However, this one is very different. This is a family saga, and it is told from multiple different perspectives. And it's based on a true story of a group of formerly enslaved people who moved up into the hills and created their own kingdom. At the heart of this story is the queen of that kingdom and the legacy that she leaves. Our main characters in the modern day timeline are her descendants. And it's just so terrific. I love this book. It's really lush and descriptive. And anyone who is looking for a just really rich yet hopeful story, this is definitely it. Broken Country is phenomenal. Literally no notes. I have 0 complaints, 0 comments about this book other than it is that good, and the hype is so real. you don't know about Broken Country, this book has kind of taken the socials by storm. So it's a literary fiction set back in the 1960s with a flashback even further about a woman and the two men that she loves. There's a first love element, there's a second chance romance element, there is an infidelity element, so know that. And at the heart of this story, there is an unaliving. And throughout the whole book, you're being led in the direction of who died and ultimately who killed that person. So it's just really well structured at the beginning. You know, this flashpoint of violence, and then over the course of the book, you're leading up to the trial, and it's so terrific. The love story is stunning, and the author Claire Leslie Hall does something that I think is so unique in that she has you torn between the two love interests. And you're really thinking, how in the world could I choose between these two men, or can this woman choose between these two men? And it's that well done. It's so, so good. It is a powerhouse story about grief and loss. And I can't recommend it enough. This is a terrific book club book. Everyone is going to have a different take on the romance element in this book, as well as relate to the grief and loss and the suspense that the author creates in this terrific novel. For years, people have been telling me to read Betty, and I've just gotten, I've just started on BookTube earlier this year, and I've already had multiple comments about how I need to read Betty. And you were right. This book will live in my heart for the rest of my life. Tiffany McDaniel did something that I didn't know was possible. She captured the beauty and joy and sorrow and heartache of poverty in a stunning, stunning novel. This has, you definitely want to check your trigger warnings, because there are some awful, awful things that happen in this book, but there are some also very beautiful things. And for anyone who's a daddy's girl, you're going to see yourself reflected in this main character. I am that girl, and the relationship that our main character has with her father is absolutely stunning, and left me in tears, What I will say is it is a unique reading experience. McDaniel has a way with words. It's very lyrical and poetic. And it took me a minute to kind of get the rhythm of her voice and her narrative style. But once I did, I gobbled this up. I cannot say enough about this stunning book. I loved it so much, and I shared on one of my social media posts, this book healed something in me that I didn't know needed to be healed. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful book. And again, I'll never, ever, ever stop thinking about this book, recommending this book. I loved it. It's so, so, so good. To no one's surprise, Atmosphere is my #1 favorite book of the year so far. This is my #1 favorite reading experience. Do I think this is the best book on this list that I've even shared in terms of the way it was written and, the literature element of the book? No. If I had to give an award for the best written, it would probably be Betty. However, this was the best reading experience. It puts you in a chokehold from word go and does not let you go. It is a roller coaster of emotions, and it is a stunning, stunning, stunning love story and a beautiful portrayal of what it was like to be a woman in a male-dominated field in the 80s, as well as a queer woman kind of discovering her queerness and trying to navigate what that meant in the 1980s, and having to remain invisible in a sense, because you would lose everything if you were out. There is a line in this book that is etched on my heart for forever and ever and always. Like, I sobbed. I mean, I'm talking ugly cry, like snot, whole 9 yards at the end of this book. And everyone that I know that has read it has loved it, with the exception of a few people. There's been some criticism about they wish there was more like 80s pop culture in here. I don't think it needs it. There's been some criticism that it didn't have a lot of the steam and just the tension that you would expect from a romance. Well, that's because it's not a romance novel, it's a love story. It could use a little bit more of space and kind of behind the scenes NASA. There is some of that, but overall, I think that this book did everything that the author set out to do, creating these really indelible characters that you will never forget, and a beautiful story that you just didn't want to put down the entire time you're reading it, and a book that is going to live in people's hearts, my own included, for years and years and years to come. I want to hear what have been some of your favorite reads of 2025. I'm still making my TBR for the rest of the year. I have some books that I'm very excited about. Wild Dark Shore is on that list. I really want to get to Demon Copperhead, the new Silvia Moreno Garcia, the new Isabel Cañez are both high, high, high on my priority list. Also, Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, the new V.E. Schwab. I have a feeling that the rest of this year is going to be a little bit more of an eclectic mix. Been reading very varied because of my TBR jar, and that's been so much fun. So stay tuned for my monthly TBRs and my monthly reading wrap-ups featuring my TBR jar pulls. And yeah, I want to hear from you. What have you loved so far this year?